Hey CME buddies, let's today start with paper 4, that is fundamentals of business economics and management. Right, we will be covering part B, and part B is all about fundamentals of management. This is more to do with business studies that you would have done in class 11th and 12th. This part B consists of, or rather, it carries a weightage of 30%, and we'll try and finish it completely along with the MCQs, right? So MCQs will be done at the end of the completion of the entire module. Now we will be primarily focusing on the concepts, right? So let's start with fundamentals of management. Let's start with introduction of management, that is 5.1. Okay, the first thing that we start with is definition of management, right? When we talk about management, we need to understand what exactly is management. Now George R. Terry, he has beautifully explained the concept of management. Management is basically a distinct process. Distinct means it's a unique process. Consists of what? It consists of four things. One is planning, second is organizing, third is actuating and controlling, right? So management is basically a distinct process or a unique process which consists of what? One is planning, that is you plan the things or you plan the series of events, you organize it accordingly. Actuating simply means to activate something or to start up something, and you control it eventually to make sure you get the desired results or the outcome. Okay, why it is done? It is done to perform, to determine and accomplish the objectives of what? Of the organization. How? By the use of people and resources, right? So that is basically the definition of management. Let's repeat that once again. Management simply means it is a distinct process. It consists of four things, that is planning, organizing, actuating and controlling. Perform to determine and accomplish what? The objectives by the use of people and the resources, right? Okay, so we can say hence management simply means technique of extracting work or getting work done from others, right? Or we can say technique of extracting work from others in an integrated and coordinated manner. That means basically it's an art of getting things done from the others by bringing everyone together and getting the objectives, or rather for realizing specific objectives. How? Through the use of material resources. Now this material resources can be anything. It can be manpower, it can be labor, it can be machinery, right? So these are various material resources that are used to achieve the objectives of the organization. So this is what is management. So management simply means technique of extracting work from others in an integrated and coordinated manner. Please remember, it's an art or it's a technique of getting work done from others in an integrated or coordinated manner. For what? For realizing specific objectives. How? Through the use of material resources, right? Okay, let's move on to the nature of management. Okay, what is basically the nature of management, right? The first point you need to remember is basically it is more result oriented, right? So what do you mean by result orientation? Simply it means manager's primary motive or the core objective of the manager is to ensure productive performance. That means he has to ensure quality performance. From whom? From the people who are working under him or who are his subordinates. Through what? Through something which you have already learned, through planning, direction and controlling, right? So something which you have already done earlier, again that's the repetition. So basically when you talk about result orientation, the manager's primary motive is to what? To ensure that there is a productive performance or quality performance. Through what? Through planning, direction and control. For what? Eventual purpose is to achieve the desired results. So that's what is result orientation all about. So here we are talking about what? Nature of management. The first point we have covered is result orientation, right? The second one is humane approach. Humane simply means manpower, right? Or human beings, right? When we say humane, it simply means manpower. So getting job done through people. So that is humane approach. Fine. Profitability can't be achieved without ensuring cooperation and securing positive response from the people. So if you got to get things done from the human beings or the manpower or the staff that you have, this can be done only through two things. One is by ensuring cooperation among themselves and also making sure that you receive a positive response from people. right? So if they don't have a positive approach toward things, you will never be able to achieve your desired goals or results. So primarily you have to make sure that there is a cooperation among the staff or the human beings that are working in the organization, and you basically secure a positive response from these people, right? Okay, the third one is process centric. What do you mean by process centric? Management itself is basically a process, right? When you have to manage people, then obviously that's a process. You got to streamline things. That means you got to arrange things in an order and get things done. So basically it is a process. It can also be called as a function or an activity. All these three means the same, right? So management simply is a process, function, or an activity. Process is continued till the objective is achieved. So the eventual purpose of getting, or rather doing a process, is to make sure that whatever is the objective of the organization that is being achieved. So hence it should be process centric. Fine. Fourth one is what? Fourth one is universal activity. So it simply means, or simply it tends to tell you that management is not only meant for running of an organization, it can be used in the various aspects of life. So here it says the management is not applicable to establishments only. So it's not only meant for the organizations running only. It is also applicable in what? Political, social, religious, and educational institutions only, right? You would have seen in schools and colleges also, there's a certain management that is being run by education. Management is there for ensuring that there is effective running of the institution. Similarly, if you see political parties and all, they have a hierarchy, right? So they work as per their hierarchy. This is again a management. Again, if you talk about social and religious aspects also, you generally tend to have people who are a part of management for ensuring the effective running of that particular place, or the religion or religious place that we are talking about, right? So that's what is universal activity. So universal activity simply means it's not only applicable to establishment, it is also applicable for what? Political, social, religious, and educational institutions also, right? Okay, please remember, management is not just an art, but it is a science as well. So we generally, whenever we talk about management, we say it is a science as well as an art. Okay, so when we say management is an art, that simply means there are certain principles of the management. So basically management work on the basis of certain principles that are already being laid down. So there are definite principles for the management. But when we say that management is a science, science is nothing but the applications of these principles. The principles that we discussed in the art, if you apply that, that becomes science. It's as simple as that. So management can be defined both as science as well as art. If it's an art, how it is an art? Because it works on a definite principles of management. Whereas when we say it's a science, the applications of these principles becomes the science. Fine. So application of these principles, how? By predetermined objectives can be achieved. So eventual purpose of everything is for the achievement of the objectives, right? So when you apply this art into the science, your predetermined objectives can be achieved. Fine. Okay, then sixth one is what? Management is a group activity. Management is not a one-man game, right? If you got to attain your desired objectives, it has to be a collective or an integrated effort. That's what we read in the definition also. So management is basically a group activity. Management is concerned with what? It is concerned with group efforts and by not individual effort. So you cannot attain anything single-handedly. There has to be a cohesiveness among the group to achieve all the predetermined objectives or the rationale of the company, right? Okay, then seventh one is what? Management is a system of authority. Fine. What do you mean by system of authority? It has an authoritarian setup. Authoritarian simply means there is someone who's sitting on the top and who give instructions, right? So that is what is authoritarian setup, right? Now procedures to be followed by subordinates. So whatever is being told by a single person in the top, or for that matter, if there is a top level management or a middle level management, they will delegate things or they will give you the instructions. So when the subordinates have to ensure that these procedures are being followed, and they have to ensure that rules and regulations are being complied with, right? So that's what is management is a system of authority means. So it basically it says it has an authoritarian setup. Procedures should be followed by whom? By the subordinates to ensure rules and regulations, right? Then it says management involves decision making, right? So basic purpose or the core objective or the key role of a management is basically decision making. So it simply implies decision making regarding the organization and operation of business in different dimensions. So whatever aspects a business is basically looking into, for example, if it's an operations, if it is an HR, or for that matter it is finance, that is the different operation of business. So every role or every aspect of the business or every dimension of the business, it is very important to have a person in a decision making role. So that's being controlled and managed by the management, right? Hence it is very important that management basically involves all kind of decision making. So it simply says it implies decision making regarding what the organization and the different operations that are there in the business. That's why I said that it's operation of business in different dimensions, right? This dimensions is nothing, just for you to remember, it can be any dimension or any other field of the business, that is HR or say finance or say IT, etc., right? Okay, then we come to the next point. It says management implies good leadership, right? How can you have a good management? You can have a good management only if you have a good leadership. So managers shall have the capacity to influence the behavior of the subordinates. That means they should have good leadership skills. They should be able to drive the employees the way they want it to. They should not be bossy, rather they should be leader. So they should set an example for them, right? So that's what is a good leadership all about. So managers shall have the capacity, they should have the ability to influence the behavior or to have an impact on the behavior, or they should motivate them. Who are the persons I'm talking about? I'm talking about the subordinates, right? So managers shall have the capacity to influence the behavior of the subordinates. Fine. Then we come to something called as multidisciplinary. Multidisciplinary means different aspects. So it simply says management can draw ideas and concepts from what? From various disciplines like economics, statistics, mathematics, psychology, sociology, etc. So the different aspects of life are there that should be looked up to for what? For having a good effective management. How? By taking ideas and the concepts from the various disciplines. Now these disciplines can be, you can have certain economics. For example, you need to look into microeconomics and macroeconomics both for making good decisions, right? Similarly, you can have a look at statistics for what? For analysis of data. Similarly, you can use maths. You can also use psychology. Why psychology? Because if you don't understand the psychology of your staff or the manpower that's working in the organization, you would be not be able to ever be a good manager. So hence, if you have to have a good management, then it should be multidisciplinary. Multidisciplinary simply means you should be able to draw ideas and concepts from what? From various disciplines like economics, stats, mathematics, psychology, sociology, etc. Right? Okay. Then next nature of the management is it should be goal oriented. Right? It is a result oriented activity. So whatever you do, eventually you do it for what? For the achievement of the activity of the business. For example, if it is for a social cause, then basically you are doing it for the welfare of the people. Similarly, the other goal can be profit. So if you have to attain a certain profit, your management should work in that direction. So basically every management decision that's being taken, it should be basically goal oriented. Okay, it strives, or rather it takes efforts to what? To achieve the predetermined targets with available resources. So a good manager will actually make sure that their targets are being achieved with whatever available resources they have. So basically they have to make sure in less cost they are able to achieve more profits or more results. So that's what is goal oriented. Fine. Then we talk about levels of management. Okay. Now management defines different hierarchies. What are different hierarchies of a management? It can be either a top management, middle management, and lower management. Right? These are based on what? These are basically based on nature and importance of activity. Right? For example, if I talk about decision making, then decision making is something which will be taken by the top management. Right? But if I talk about the execution of the work, that would be done by the subordinates. So that's what is levels of management decides. So management basically defines different hierarchies. What are the three different hierarchies? One is the top level, then the middle level, and finally the lower level. Right? We will discuss that in detail in the further chapter, but this is for you the understanding of the nature of management. So management basically defines hierarchies, top, middle, and lower. These are based on what? These are based on two things. One is on the nature, and the second one is on the importance of the activities. Fine. Okay. Then we come to management need not be the owners. So the people who are managing need not be the owners of the business. So management is completely different from the owners of the business, right? Now what do you mean by that? It simply says managers need not be owner of the enterprise. For example, if I talk about a joint stock company, JSE here is joint stock company. So if you talk about a joint stock company, management and owners are different entities. Okay, what do you mean by a joint stock company? Joint stock company simply means company where the shares can be bought and sold by the shareholders. So if a company basically is listed somewhere, say in an NSE, that is National Stock Exchange, or Bombay Stock Exchange, here the shares can be transacted. That means they can be even bought or they can be even sold, right? So when the shares can be both bought and sold, that company is basically known as a joint stock company, right? In this case, what happens? We all know that if it's a joint stock company, then the shareholders of the company becomes the owner of the company. So basically, we can say that managers need not be mandatorily the owners of the enterprise. In joint stock company, for example, management and owners are two different entities, right? And finally, the nature of management is basically it is intangible. Intangible simply means something which cannot be felt, touched, smell, right? Something which doesn't have a physical feeling. So basically management is intangible. Why it is intangible? Results of management can be witnessed in terms of improved performance. So you get to know that if a management is doing well or not by what? By seeing the performance of the business. So if it gives an improved performance or profitability or productivity, then in that case we can say management, although is intangible, but they are performing well. So that's what is management intangible reflects, or that's what it implies. Fine, let's quickly look at the points of nature of management. First, it should be result oriented. Second, it should have a human approach. It should be process centric. It should be a universal activity. Management is a science as well as an art. It's a group activity, right? It's a system of authority. Then you talk about decision making. It also implies good leadership. It can be multidisciplinary. It should be rather goal oriented. There are different levels of management, that is top, middle and lower. Then they need not be the owners, and finally it is basically intangible. So these are basically the points that needs to be covered under nature of management. Now we move on to one of the most important aspect of the chapter, whether management is a science or art. Okay, when we saw the nature of the management, we did say that art is basically what? Art is basically predetermined set of goals or the rules that have been prescribed, and science is what? Science is basically an application of that. No, that is incorrect. That's what is given in your book, right? Here we would rectify that. Okay, here we do understand, or what is correct is that science is basically a set of predetermined rules. Predetermined rules. Whereas as an art, it's basically an application of those rules. So what you did above, it is incorrect. That's what is given in your book. So I covered it as it is. Actually, what happens is science is basically a systemized body of knowledge pertaining to a particular field of inquiry. So this is basically the predetermined or a systemized body of knowledge, or these are the science basically contains the prescribed rules, and art is basically an application of that. So that's the difference between the point covered above and what we are covering now, right? So please make sure of that. So what we did here is absolutely reverse of what we should have studied. So when we say management is an art, management as an art basically talks about the applications of the principles of management, whereas science is science covers the definite principles of management. So that's how it is. Fine. Okay, so when we talk about management as a science, we know that it is basically a systemized body of knowledge pertaining to what? Pertaining to a particular field of inquiry. So whatever field you are going to work in, if the science basically talks about a systemized body of knowledge in that, right? It contains what? It contains concepts, hypotheses, theories, experimentation and principles, right? For what? To explain the cause and effect relationship between two or more factors, right? So when we talk about science as an management as a science, it basically contains various concepts, hypotheses, theories, experimentation and principles. For what? For explaining cause and effect relationship between what? There should be minimum two or more factors, right? So that's what is management as a science, right? Now in order to recognize management as a science, there are certain characteristics attached to it. So we would see what are these characteristics. So basically characteristics to be recognized as science are: First of all, it should be universally accepted principles. There should be universally accepted principles, right? What do you mean by that? Management contains a few fundamental principles that can be applied universally, right? So example is principle of unity of command. Okay, so management basically contains few fundamental principles which are universally applicable. That is it is applicable across everywhere and anywhere. So first one is principle of unity of command. What do you mean by principle of unity of command? It simply means if there is one man, there should be one boss. It's as simple as that. That's what is principle of unity of command. That is one man, one boss, right? This principle is applicable for for both business and non-business organization. So it is a universally accepted principle. Now basically management as a science runs on the principle that there are certain universally accepted principles. Example is principle of unity of command, simply means one man, one boss. This principle is applicable for both business and non-business organization, right? Then we come to experimentation and observation. Okay, when we say experimentation and observation, management principles are based on scientific inquiry and observation, right? So whatever management principles are there, when we talk about science, it is based on certain inquiry and observation. They have been developed how? They have been developed through various experiences and practical experiences of large number of managers. So basically they have been developed through practical experiences of large number of the various managers who have existed before. The example can be fair remuneration ensures satisfied workforce. Simply means on the basis of your experience you would have determined what is the nature of the work. So that nature of work determines a certain salary, right? Now if you pay salary lesser for that profile, obviously the work force won't be satisfied. But if you make sure that the work deserves a certain salary and that's being paid to them, in that case you can ensure your workforce is satisfied. So that's what is this is one of the perfect example of experimentation or observation. So the salary is determined based on the various experimentations that's been done and basis of observation. Now you would see that a top level management people are paid a higher salary, whereas the lower level management are paid lower salary. Why? Because they do decision making, which is again very important for a business to run, whereas they do only the execution of the instructions that's given to them. So hence they are paid a lower salary. So their responsibility is higher, hence they are paid higher, whereas their responsibility is lower, hence they are paid lower, right? So that's what is experimentation and observation all about. Then we talk about cause and effect relationship. Now scientific principles lays down cause and effect relationship between various variables. That's what we did in the definition also, right? If you remember, it talks about explain cause and effect relationship between two or more factors, right? So scientific principles lays down cause and effect relationship between various variables. Now what the best example of that can be, lack of parity between authority and responsibility will lead to ineffectiveness. What do you mean by parity? Parity simply means uniformity, right? So that means if there is no uniformity between the authority that's given to a person and the responsibility that's given, that will lead to ineffectiveness. Why? Because if someone has a higher authority and lower responsibility, he may misuse the authority. But if someone has a higher responsibility and not given adequate authority, he won't be able to give proper output. So that's why there should be a parity or a balance between authority and responsibility. That's a best example of cause and effect relationship, right? Then we talk about test of validity and predictability. What do you mean by test of validity and predictability? Validity of scientific principles shall stand the test of time, or shall stand the time of test rather. Not test of time, it should be time of test, I'm sorry. It simply means that whatever situation it's there, whether it is good or bad for a business, whatever principles are there that are being followed uniformly to make sure that the business is able to sustain. Even if not grow, they should be able to sustain, right? Each time the test shall give the same result. That's one of the most important aspects. So whatever test you are doing, every time in whatever situation it's there, they should be able to give you the same result. Now future events can also be predicted with reasonable accuracy by using scientific principles. So scientific principles can also be utilized for making sure that whatever is going to happen in future, you can predict the outcomes way before, right? So that's what is test of validity and predictability. So when we talk about science as a management, it talks about a systemized body of knowledge pertaining to particular field of inquiry, contains of what? Concepts, hypotheses, theories, experimentation and principles. For what? For explaining cause and effect relationship between two or more factors. There are certain characteristics that will help you to recognize basically whether it is a management is a science or not. The first one is there should be universally accepted principles. One of the most important is principle of unity of command, which simply says if there is one man, there should be one boss. Second, you talk about experimentation and observation. Basically, they are based on experimentation and observation, on scientific inquiry and observation rather, or rather you can say managers develop a good observation skills or experimentation skills with their practical experiences. Then you talk about cause and effect relationship. The best example can be that of lack of parity or lack of balance between authority and responsibility will eventually lead to what? Ineffectiveness. And you talk about test of validity and predictability. Simply says that the principle shall stand the time of the test, right? Then we talk about management as an art. Management as an art, it simply means application of knowledge, right? So basically science talks about what? Science talks about the predetermined rules, set of rules, and management as an art talks about the application of knowledge and personal skills for what? For achieving the desired results. So management as an art simply means application of what? Knowledge and personal skills for the achievement of desired results, right? Okay, just before we move on, please remember, or rather I would like to tell you the principle of unity of command again. Principle of unity of command simply means one man, one boss, right? The best example can be, for example, there are two people, say A and B. A has say only one boss and B has say two bosses. So whose performance do you think will be better? Obviously the performance of A will be better than B, because if you have multiple bosses, then it's very obvious you don't know whose instructions you should listen to, and there will be a conflict of interest. But when you have only one boss, in that case the management can run more efficiently, or the person A can basically perform more efficiently. Hence, that is the principle of unity of command, that simply says for every one man there should be only one boss, right? Okay, again we come back to management as an art. Management as an art simply means application of knowledge and the personal skills to achieve desired results. What are the various features of management as an art? First one is practical application, right? Okay, it is important to know practical applications of theoretical principles, right? Because you are going to apply the principles. In that case, you should have the perfect knowledge of the theoretical aspect also. So it is important to know practical application of the theoretical principle. That simply means qualification is not sufficient to be successful as a manager. You can't simply be an MBA and be a good manager. You need to know how to apply these rules in the real situation for getting the desired results is the key for the manager. So you may do CMA, be getting an all India rank, but eventually if your performance in the organization is not up to the mark, then your CMA degree or you being a rank holder is pretty much insignificant. So that's the best example of practical knowledge. So whatever you learn, that's a different aspect, but the application of that, it's very important for being successful and getting the desired results in the organization. Okay, second, when you talk about the personal skill, okay, the level of success and quality of performance differs from person to person. That's obvious. Every person can't be successful at the same level, and their quality of performance will also not be same. So it basically differs from person to person. The best example can be, every manager has a different way of managing things based on what? Based on knowledge, experience and personality. Now, how does every manager has a different way of what? Managing things. How do they manage things? On the basis of their knowledge, experience and personality. Some people are good in this and others are not. So you may have the same skill set, but your success and quality may not be the same. Quality of performance may not be the same, because every manager has a different way of managing things, which is completely based on the knowledge that they have, or the experience they have, or the personality they carry, right? So that's what is personal skill. Third one talks about the creativity. Creativity is what? Producing something which requires combination of intelligence and imagination. So when you combine both intelligence of the manager and its imagination, that the creativity aspect talks about that. Management also needs creativity. So if you got to be a good manager, you got to be creative enough. It combines both what? Human and non-human resources to achieve the desired results. Human, why? Because you should be able to manage the human, or rather you should be able to guide the human resources properly. Similarly, whatever resources that you have, that is something non-human that we are talking about, you should be able to use it optimally. So that's how you can be more creative in nature. Then perfection through practice. Okay, what do you mean by perfection through practice? Managers learn through trial and error initially. So when you start as a manager, there is a more inclination of you learning through what trials and errors, but with the application of management principle they perfected the job of managing. So initially it may be difficult, you may be doing more trial and error, but with the experience you would be able to perfect the art of managing people, right? Then finally you talk about goal oriented. What do you mean by goal oriented? Management uses various resources. What are these various resources? There are 5 resources which all start with M. First one is men, money, material, machinery, and the methods, right? So management basically use 5 M resources. What are these various M resources? Men, money, material, machinery, and methods. For what? For ensuring growth of the organization, right? So this is what is management and art as an art. So management as an art simply means indicates the application of knowledge and personal skills. What are the various features? Application of practical knowledge, personal skills, creativity, perfection through practice, and it should be goal oriented. And eventually we can say that management is a combination of both science as well as art. So you need to know as to what you're going to apply, and its application again is important. So hence management is combination of both. Then we come to a topic called as scope of management. Now please remember, when we talk about part B of this fundamentals of business economics and management, names are very important. So certain concepts will have names, you got to remember this. So when we talk about scope of management, the persons that we are referring to are Harbison and Myers. So if a question asks you who were the one who defined or who came up with the idea of the scope of management, you need to remember the word name Harbison and Myers. Now this Harbison and Myers have classified scope under 3 broad groups, right? So they are categorized into 3 broad groups. What are these 3 groups? First one is economic resource, second one is system of authority, and third one is class or elite, right? Okay, let's start with the first one. First one is economic resource, right? Economic resource generally basically consists of 4 factors of productions. What are these 4 factors of production? Land, labor, capital, and entrepreneur, or what we also call as a management. Fine. So the 4 factors of production are land, labor, capital, and management, or you can also call this as entrepreneur. Who's an entrepreneur? Someone who starts a business. That is who is an entrepreneur. Now these factors are essential to achieve higher growth with sustainable profit in the long run. So if you apply these factors properly, you would be able to attain a higher growth in the business, and you would be able to sustain or maintain the same profit over a longer period of time. Please remember, management itself is an economic resource. That is the 4th resource that we spoke about. So management itself is basically a part of economic resource, right? Then you talk about system of authority. What do you mean by system of authority? Simply means set of rules and procedures that needs to be followed by the subordinates or adhered by the subordinates, and ensure their compliance with rules and regulations. So following of rules and regulations is basically the system of authority. And finally you talk about class or elite. What do you mean by class or elite? Management is stated to be of distinct class. That means it has a unique class of its own, and it has its own value system. Now managerial class performs activities that is essential component of the organization. So you got to perform the activities as a managerial class, which is a very important aspect of running the organization. So the 3 points that you need to cover in scope of management is economic resource, system of authority, and class or elite. Scope of management was defined by Harbison and Myers. What is economic resource? It talks about the 4 factors of production. System of authority is following of rules or regulations, and finally you talk about class or elite, which says that it is basically management has its own distinct class, or it is unique on its own, and it has its own value system aspect, right? Okay, we come to the last part of the chapter. This talks about management and emerging profession. Okay, what does this topic talks about? It says any specialized activity becomes a profession if it has the following characteristics. So if there is a specialized activity, how it will become a profession? It will become profession only if it has the following characteristics. What are they? First of all, there is a systemized body of knowledge used for what? Instructing, advising, or guiding others, right? So basically there should be a systemized body of knowledge for what? For instructing, advising, or for guiding others. So these 3 points you got to remember. Okay, then it says there is a formal method and system for what? For teaching and training people with that knowledge and skill. So you, first of all, you have to have a systemized body of knowledge for what? For instructing, advising, or guiding others. So learning is the first part of it. Then you got to teach them, or you got to train them. So there should be a formal method for that. For what? For teaching and training people with that knowledge and skill, right? So there's a set of people who already have acquired and they would be able to impart it to other set of peoples, right? Then there is a scope of creating consultant for that skill. So once you learn that skill, you got to attain the art of consultancy. That means you should be able to deliver it to other people who need that information. So that is what is consultant all about. So there should be a scope of creating consultant for that skill. Now after you create consultant, there should be a formation of association by such consultants, right? So these consultants should form an association. Existence of code of conduct for such professional men. So these association or the set of people who are called as consultants, they should have a code of conduct and they should be readiness to respond to the need of such men. So organization should make sure that the men who have attained the level of consultancy, whatever their needs or their demands is being imparted by the organization, right? So this is what is management as an emerging profession. So it simply says any specialized activity becomes a profession when it has the following characteristics. So this is basically a step-by-step procedure. First of all, there should be a systemized body of knowledge used for instructing, advising or guiding others. Then there should be a formal method and system for what? For teaching and training people with that knowledge and skill. Then there should be a scope of creating consultant for that skill. Then should be a formation of association for by such consultants. There should be an existing code of conduct for such professional men. And finally, there should be readiness to respond to the needs of such men. Right? With this, we finish 5.1. In the next session, we'll be looking at 5.2. If you really like this content, please press the like button and do subscribe to the channel for our upcoming videos. Right? Thank you for joining and happy learning.